Amazingly offensive, challenging you to think offensively, challenging you to be a part of the team. This is not regular interference. This is offensive interference. With the baldest man in entertainment, me, Nick Cellini. And welcome to episode 2 of Offensive Interference. I am Nick Cellini, and joining me now, one of my friends who's also in the business, so to speak, Brandon Adams. We've known each other, BA, for how many years now?
Gosh, going on, 10, 11 years? Long time.
We're no spring chickens.
We are not anymore.
We were just talking prior to the program about having young kids and how it essentially wears you out.
It has aged me 25 years. I always joke with my wife that I love my son, but he's exactly as much trouble as he's worth. You know, it's not that he's way, more trouble than he's worth or way less trouble. He's exactly as much trouble as he's worth.
Yeah, you don't want to put him in a basket and leave him on a doorstep.
Don't want to do that, and yet a lot of the things that I used to enjoy, I have simply just given up because I have no time for them anymore.
Like, for instance, some of our friends who don't have kids were talking about going out on a Wednesday. Can you imagine going out and really tying one on a Wednesday and then waking up, little Charlie wants to play? And
for me, that'd be like going to the moon. I'd have to prepare for 6 months to do that. I'd have to put on one of those suits and get in one of those anti-gravity chambers. That's about what it'd be like for me to go out on a Wednesday night now. That's the most absurd idea I could ever imagine.
What's the old phrase, dancing through the raindrops? Nico, my son, would be dancing through the puke if he tried to play with me after tying one on.
Well, that's the thing. Is like night. Any kind of, I'm talking about even like the slightest hangover will scare you straight the next morning because they want to go at full speed at 6 a.m., 6:30, whatever else. And it's enough to make you want to give up whatever vice you have in your life. It's enough to make you want to give it up cold turkey because you cannot stand how much energy is required to be a parent to a child like that early in the morning.
They don't stop moving and they don't stop talking. From the moment they wake up until the moment they pass out at night, they do not stop talking.
Well, here's the thing that I've learned. Before I had my son, Charlie, all of this sounded terrible to me. I didn't want kids. I mean, how many dinners have we spent?
You were terrified.
Where I talked about the idea of just simply not wanting them. The thing that I didn't know, and you have to have a child to know, is there's a big difference in taking care of a kid and taking care of your kid. Because all of a sudden you do find that extra level of motivation that you didn't know you even had, a gear that you didn't even know that you had. It's all because you look at a child and he looks like you or sort of acts like you or, is a part of you. It'd be one thing to take care of some stranger, but when it's your own son, you have sort of the energy and motivation to do what you otherwise wouldn't want to do.
If it's a stranger, you just glue him to the floor.
Sure.
Put him in a birdcage like in those old Little Rascals shorts. But no, it's your child, and so you have to do what's proper, so to speak.
It's been a lot of fun, though. I've really had a good time with it.
Well, it's been an odd father-son situation with Johnny Manziel and his father, and, of course, a couple of different articles coming out over the past few days in both ESPN, the magazine, and Sports Illustrated. Wright Thompson wrote a piece for ESPN, the magazine, and to be quite honest with you, Johnny Manziel comes off, to me anyway, as a spoiled rich kid.
Yeah.
There's no other way to say it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that, and I think one of the things that people ought to understand is just how different the Manziel story is than other stories. Most really rich people decide to donate their money to charity. They don't choose to give it to their, sons and grandsons, people like that, because these kinds of things can happen. As a matter of fact, 80% of the millionaires in this country are first generation rich. That shows you just how sort of unique this Manziel story is. And I agree with you. In the Wright Thompson piece, he comes across not looking really good because it's really hard to make sense of the world when you have so much given to you by your family who had money and also by God who sort of bestowed a bunch of talents on you. It's really hard to make sense of your place in the world when everything has come as easy for you up to this point as it has for Johnny Manziel.
Drinking with his father on the golf course, having a few drinks with his father in a steakhouse after the golf course, telling his aunt during the dinner at the steakhouse to shut the hell up, among the things talked about in this piece. And again, Johnny Manziel comes from a rich family. I guess they were in the oil business and everything that implies.
Black gold, Texas tea.
So, because they have money, they took care of their son. Their son wanted a Mercedes. So Paul Manziel bought his son a Mercedes because he wanted one. And he wanted to keep Johnny out of trouble, thinking Johnny may go and accept one of those Vegas handshakes from a booster of Texas A&M. So he bought him the Mercedes, and they were mad because it got keyed. Now, I understand, look, you're a 20-year-old kid. You don't even know who you are yet.
Right.
But as a parent, as Paul Manziel and maybe his wife should have done, you should step up and say, all right, now the spotlight's on you. We can't defend some of the things that you're doing. We can't excuse some of the things that you're doing. The parents have to come into play here.
Yeah, they don't come across looking very good in this piece either. They sort of seem sort of helpless, sort of powerless, sort of weak parents, and it's tough raising a kid like this who's got so many opportunities outside the household. I certainly appreciate that, but they just kind of come across as kind of bystanders to the whole thing.
For the ride, making him sign autographs, even though he detests signing autographs. They had their garage packed with items for him to sign at a certain point in time. And don't forget, his nickname around the Texas A&M campus is what? Johnny Effing Football.
Yeah.
So you're talking about his parents thinking at one point about getting monogrammed, personalized license plates with JFF. Can you imagine doing that for your son? You know, you always want the best for your son. I want my son to be athletically gifted like that. I don't know if I would go so far as to do something like that.
Yeah, it's just that whole stage parent type thing, a little too along for the ride on this, as opposed to kind of establishing some hard and fast ground rules. I was disappointed. First of all, Wright Thompson's a great writer. The piece that he did for ESPN, the magazine, is outstanding. He's maybe one of our best sports writers. But as much as I enjoyed sort of being exposed to the story, I have to admit I don't really like any of the principles in the story because I don't really think any of them are doing things completely the right way.
Well, this is a scary quote coming from Paul Manziel, again, the father of Johnny. It could come unraveled, and when it does, it's going to be bad, real bad. Now, I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Well, okay, here's the way I would respond to that. In the SEC, it's sort of like the NFL. The safest bet is always betting against what just happened. It's really hard to repeat success. So even if Johnny Manziel had the sort of off-field life of Tim Tebow, it'd still be hard to come back in year two, do what you did in year one. Add to that the fact that he's got a party lifestyle that he can't quite keep corralled. I sort of think that the ominous prediction from Manziel, his father, I sort of think that has a chance of kind of maybe coming true here a little bit.
His father stopped drinking because he wanted to encourage his son to stop drinking. How about telling your son, I don't want you to drink? I mean, he's probably going to go do it on his own,
right.
But I don't know if I want him getting plastered in front of me in a steakhouse. Again, he's 20 years old. He doesn't know who he is yet, but as a parent, don't you have to try to steer him in the right direction?
Yeah, I think you do. I think you have to be willing to have him hate you. And 18, 19, 20-year-olds, a lot of them hate their parents. I think you have to be willing to go there if you really want to do what's right for him. And he doesn't seem to be necessarily willing to do that.
My 19-year-old thinks he knows everything at this point, and he probably thinks I'm the biggest idiot in the world, and probably a lot of people listening to this podcast feel the same way. But the point is, you're not there to be their friends. You're not.
I completely agree with that. And there does seem to be an idea that the parents don't want to jump off the gravy train wherever it's going, so they don't want to make him too mad right now. It's almost like that thing from the Twilight Zone years and years ago where like the old folks were afraid to hurt the young kids' feelings.
Right.
That's what this sort of feels like.
Because he'll turn them, he'll make them invisible.
Exactly.
He'll make them basically disintegrate.
Which is basically what happened in that episode of the Twilight Zone. Well, I'm 312 years old.
The batting averages of the Braves, certain Braves players have disintegrated. What's going to be the secret weapon in my eyes when the postseason rolls around for the Atlanta Braves? We'll talk about that up next. It's offensive interference, and it rolls on.
ALS doesn't just kill you. It shuts you down, little by little, bit by bit.
It starts small. Maybe it's holding a pencil that gets difficult.
Or getting up from your chair. Then you find it hard to turn the pages of your book.
Because you can't move your fingers.
Your mind keeps working, but your body doesn't respond.
You won't see it coming because no one knows where it comes from.
Soon you can't hug your mother or pick up your child.
You won't be able to tie your shoes.
You don't need to tie your shoes because now you can't walk.
You can't eat or shave.
Or laugh or sing.
First you can't catch your ball, then you can't catch your breath.
ALS doesn't just kill you.
It steals your life, a little bit at a time.
And it doesn't stop until there's nothing left.
Unless we stop it first. Unless we stop it now.
I'm Dave Gleason. Let's put our heads together and find a cure for ALS.
Back here on Offensive Interference, talking some baseball. Nick Cellini and old friend Brandon Adams, and certainly, B.A., you've been down to a number of Braves games this year and over the years, and the Braves, despite some of these offensive numbers, still find themselves with an 11-game lead on the Washington Nationals. And when you look at some of these batting averages, you got to start wondering, and you look at the strikeout totals, everything is great right now. Is this going to be a problem in the postseason when you have to play small ball?
I don't necessarily think it is. I think the way that we evaluate Major League Baseball is already starting to change. And in like the next 5-10 years, I think this sort of old school conversation about batting average and too many strikeouts, things like that, I think it's going to be completely replaced by a more analytic approach, because people who've been sort of chicken littles about this team for a few months, they keep being proven wrong, and I'm not so sure they won't continue to be proven wrong the rest of the summer and into the fall.
Well, I talked about who the secret weapon could be, and I'm going to mention the Upton brothers, and maybe it's easy to say, but Tim Hudson mentioned this a long time ago when he was on the radio with us. The back of your baseball card says what it says for a reason. I know that B.J. Upton has been absolutely deplorable. The batting average, as he's banged up, is at $177. Justin had that hot start to the season. His batting average now down to $257. I just, for some reason, see one of these two guys, or maybe both of them, heating up and playing some outstanding baseball once the postseason rolls around.
Let me ask you about that then. In the case of B.J. Upton, who's getting ready to come back from injury after, I guess, a few rehab appearances, would you reinsert him in the lineup with the way they're playing right now? Because I'm not so sure that I would.
It's a very good question. He's going to have to get his shot, though, because he's making way too much money.
Does he have to for that reason? Or can you say, is it possible to say, long-term contract, long-term commitment, we'll worry about that in the future for right now? We don't use the word chemistry with baseball. We're going to let this lineup sort of continue to produce with the chemistry that it has.
I think the lineup as we see it constructed right now is going to be the same for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. But we know that things are ever changing in baseball, and we know that Freddie Gonzalez doesn't have that same loyalty to veterans like Bobby Cox used to have.
It's a different kind of mindset, sure.
But I do think that B.J. Upton's going to get his chances to redeem himself going into the postseason. Maybe it's going to be a guy like Jason Hayward. I just can't see these guys playing this poorly through the postseason. How many times have we seen guys like Alex Rodriguez be outstanding during the regular season and then disappear in the postseason? Maybe it's the opposite for one of these guys.
Yeah, I think, the reason why the statistics in baseball are so talked about and discussed is because it's the one sport that has enough data for it to really matter. Football is relatively small sample size. Sometimes basketball is too. B.J. Upton is better than what he showed before his injury. I agree with you. At some point in time, there is that correction that's going to occur, and he's going to kind of look more like the player that he's been in the past.
I love Brian McCann. Brian McCann's not going to be a part of this team next year, but I'm trying to figure out, because I've heard it on more than one show around Atlanta. And that's where we are, incidentally, inside the Punchline Studios in beautiful Sandy Springs, Georgia. Offensive interference. This is our hub, if you will, our home base. But I've heard so many people say, maybe you needed to trade Brian McCann because he's not coming back next year. He's not going to come back because they can't sign him to a big deal. He wants to DH. He can't catch every day anymore. But why trade him now when he's arguably your best hitter?
Well, there's this weird tick that Braves fans have, and maybe all baseball fans have it, but I only follow the Braves, only spend time talking to Braves fans, where as soon as they feel like they have more than they need of anything in any position, they start looking to trade something. Oh, too many catchers, let's trade one. Too many young pitchers, if that was even a possible thing to have, let's trade one. Braves fans have a real bad habit of constantly trying to exploit what they feel like they have too much of. And as Freddie Gonzalez has said throughout the season, things have a way of working themselves out. And so far, he sort of found a role for everybody on this roster. Not making a trade was the smart thing for them to do.
The trade they make for the situational left-hander from the Angels, I mean, that's a brilliant trade.
Sharp move.
That's something that could really help them when all is said and done, because you've got some young lefties right now who are doing a pretty good job, but you don't want to see them overused like O'Flaherty and like Venters were.
Yeah, I will admit I was no expert on Scott Downs before he came here, but his numbers, I'm sure you've read the same things I have, really impressive, not just this year, but over the last few years. It looks like a really astute move on the part of Frank Wren.
How concerned are you, it's only one start, about Brandon Beachy?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't expect you to come back after that long of a layoff and be great. And he certainly was great before he got hurt. I think that he'll work himself into shape and probably be okay. I don't probably read a whole lot into that.
So the Braves don't have the problems that the Yankees have, poor Yankees, with Alex Rodriguez. Although it could be a blessing in disguise, because if he is banned for life, then the Yankees don't have to pay the $114 million they owe him, and they could sign another high-priced free agent. But Alex Rodriguez, let me ask you this about him, because I believe he's been cheating his entire career. You don't just start doing that.
to the degree with which he's doing it and the fact that he's so tone deaf about the way that people view him, yeah, that leads me to believe that he may be something of a sociopath that would have just sort of always been doing this. Because when he first came up, we didn't know nearly as much about this as we do now.
His body looks the same. His body really hasn't changed. And I know that a lot of the stuff that the players take is for recovery, so you can come back and play the next day. But I look at the way Mark McGwire's body changed over the years. Same deal with Barry Bonds, to a certain extent, Sammy Sosa. That's why I think something's not on the up and up. This guy was so obsessed with being the best of all time, so obsessed also with being liked that he went overboard, and he is a sociopath. He doesn't understand it, and I know. It takes one to know one. Look in the mirror if you want to know a sociopath. I do that every morning as I brush my teeth. But he's a guy that I really think is so good at telling the same lie over and over again that he actually believes it to be true.
Well, there's almost like a mental deficiency here. I'm talking about like a psychological disorder, because somebody like Sammy Sosa took the performance-enhancing drugs to go from being a marginal player to being, a top-level player. You got to believe that A-Rod would have been one no matter what, because he just sort of looks the part of a natural baseball player. It's almost as if you want to tell him, hey, you probably didn't need this stuff to be a Hall of Famer, and yet somewhere in his mind he was just too afraid to play naked, as they say.
Barry Bonds, same deal with him.
Exactly.
He saw all the attention that Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire were getting that year that Mark McGwire hit the 70 home runs, and he said, I'm going to do something about it, and boy, did he do something about it. Let me tell you something. As a guy that tries to work out, tries to stay in shape over the age of 40, you cannot. It's physically impossible to make the gains that Barry Bonds made, that Mark McGwire made, without getting a boost.
Oh, I completely agree with that. Can I ask you a quick question, though?
Yes.
Are you surprised that we don't hear more about the Yankees' role in this whole thing? Are they colluding with Major League Baseball to get out from underneath this 9-figure price tag they owe Alex Rodriguez? Insurance fraud never comes up. The Yankees' role in all this never comes up. I'm really surprised that the media doesn't go down that road more.
I believe that the Yankees would have no problem whatsoever not paying Alex Rodriguez, telling Alex Rodriguez hit the road. And don't forget, he hasn't been around this team since October, since the postseason of last year, because he was recovering from the hip surgery and then all of this nonsense started. I don't think they would miss him at all. And
not at all.
I think you're right, B.A. I think they're probably walking a pretty fine line between some type of a fraud charge hanging over their head and playing by the rules.
It would certainly seem that way to me.
Well, baseball talk is certainly going on, and don't forget, college football reigns supreme and the NFL. I'm going to mention something to you when it comes to Riley Cooper.
Okay.
And what he did during that Kenny Chesney concert that nobody else in the entire world has talked about yet. It's Offensive Interference. Yours truly, Nick Cellini, and B.A. Brandon Adams.
The Governor's Mansion, the St. Regis Hotel, and now Oxygen Financial. We are all located on West Paces Ferry Road. Come spend an hour with one of our private CFOs and get a financial plan in place for your future. Go to oxygenfinancial.net to set up a meeting today.
Back here on Offensive Interference, Nick Cellini and Brandon Adams in conversation with you. I want to talk about Riley Cooper here in just a few minutes and the angle that nobody is talking about after he drops an N-bomb on a security guard at a Kenny Chesney concert and has to face the consequences. But first, let's talk about the coaches poll. BA, it's out. Alabama, to no one's surprise, they're at number 1. Ohio State, Oregon, Stanford, and the Georgia Bulldogs round out the top 5. Texas A&M's at number 6. South Carolina's at number 7. Florida's at number 10, which means half the teams in the top 10 are from the SEC.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And from the standpoint of the Georgia Bulldogs, the schedule they're going to face this year is so different when they faced the last couple of years. I think there is a little bit of a concern that while Georgia is in the SEC, just like these other behemoths that you just mentioned, they haven't exactly played the same kind of SEC schedule because for the most part they've avoided Alabama and LSU. They'll have to play LSU in the regular season. They also add Clemson. I think there is a real wait-and-see approach on the part of some fans. Can Mark Richt and his team navigate a much tougher schedule than what they had to play the last couple of years? I think that's a legitimate question.
Absolutely. 3 out of the first 4 games, you have to go to Clemson. You have to take on South Carolina. You get a breather, and then you have to play LSU. You're going to know where this team stands early on. Now, not to say that they've got a young defense. They're going to improve over the course of the season, one would believe. But you're really being tested, especially in that opener. We saw what Clemson did in that Chick-fil-A Bowl against a very good LSU defense.
Yeah, Clemson's a legitimate team. I think they're a legitimate national championship contender. I don't think they'll win it, but I think they're a legitimate contender. And, for a guy like Todd Grantham, who, for whatever reason in Atlanta, no one ever speaks about him, and yet...
You better not sit down and kick your ass!
That's the way that he would respond. Here's a guy who's making about $800,000 a year. He's one of the highest paid coordinators in the league, and yet his DNA really isn't on any of the significant plays for the Georgia Bulldogs. Could not stop the Alabama running game in the second half last year. It's time, I think, for him, this sounds like such a cliche, but it's time for him to step up, earn some of that money.
Well, Jarvis Jones makes those plays against Florida. That's just a hustle play. He makes that strip late in the game. And the plays
and Florida also didn't score against anybody this year.
You're right.
Or last year.
And the play that he made against Missouri or plays, I think that's more athletic skill.
Right.
And you're right. The defense at times, they gave up massive amounts of yardage, especially on the ground, not only against Alabama, Kentucky, Buffalo.
Sure.
I mean, they struggled.
Yeah, my message to Grantham would be twofold. First of all, stop wearing those pleated shorts. You look ridiculous. It's not 1976. And second of all...
Wear coach's shorts, the bike shorts, with
and
the elastic waistband.
It looked better than those pleated shorts. That's not a good look.
Socks pulled up, whistle around the neck.
That's not a good look. Second of all, coach somebody up.
I've never noticed that Todd Grantham wore pleated shorts.
Oh, it's
never
terrible.
Noticed that.
He looks awful in those pleated shorts. He looks like your granddad, basically.
You're not supposed to wear anything pleated now.
You're really not.
It's not 1987.
It's really not.
What if he came out in the peg leg jeans?
That's about right. That's about right. He also wears those Sharpie pens. Maybe I've got too much time on my hand. I've spent too much time noticing.
I think you've got
the things I don't like about Todd Grantham.
Sitting at home with little Charlie, noticing the pleated shorts being worn by Todd Grantham. But you talk about where this top 10 lies. I don't know about Ohio State. Everybody says they were 12-0 last year. Now everybody knows what they're all about. I just can't see them competing against a team from the SEC. It hurts me to say that, but I've got to be honest.
Well, Meyer's a great coach, though. When Meyer was at Florida, he was mentioned simultaneously with Nick Saban. It looked like for a while Meyer might dominate the East as long as Saban has dominated the West. So if anybody could do it, as much as it sort of pains me to say this because I don't like the guy, Urban Meyer could do it.
Well, let's talk about what's going on in the NFL. We talked about the Falcons in podcast number 1. Let's talk about Riley Cooper and what he did, dropping the N-bomb on a security guard at the Kenny Chesney concert. Somebody captured it on their cell phone. He was buzzing or he was totally loaded. Either way, it's inexcusable what he said, and he had to apologize to everybody. The one thing that nobody is talking about is what Riley Cooper had on. Speaking of fashion choices,
right.
The cutoff plaid shirt, the sleeveless plaid shirt. Is he Larry the Cable Guy?
Yeah, that's not a good look.
Get her done.
Not a good look.
I think he should be penalized for that as well.
He looked like one of the bushwhackers in the old WWF.
Oh! Luke and/or Butch. Michael Vick stepped out and said, look, I've known him for 3 years. I looked into his eyes. He apologized to me. I forgive him. Marcus Vick, on the other hand, he has since deleted his tweets, called for a bounty. I'll give $1,000 to somebody that takes a shot at Riley Cooper. Now, my question is this. Where's he getting the $1,000? I know I don't have a job
right now. The same place he gets every other dollar.
I have a savings account. Dare I say, I don't think Marcus Vick has a savings account.
No, I can imagine he does.
He's walking into a SunTrust and putting in a deposit.
Marcus Vick's credit score, 335.
That's the over-under.
335.
Yeah, Michael told him essentially, you're ignorant and shut up and take down those tweets. How many times does he have to do that with Marcus? Because he's had to do it at least 4 or 5 already. How many more times?
Well, what about
the over-under for that?
Right after Michael got out of prison, you have Marcus Vick he was trying to plan that party for him in some Virginia nightclub. It's like he has the worst timing in the world. He could not be a worse brother. He poorly serves Michael in public hundreds of times.
Now, look, I've stuck my foot in my mouth. Obviously, I've been in bad situations. I don't know, though, how I would handle this one with Riley Cooper.
Yeah, it's tough because it's obviously the word that you cannot say. And I guess the other thought I have this on the other side, Nick, is this about to start happening more the same way that like TMZ is sort of constantly chasing down movie stars to see if they can get them to have a bad moment and say the wrong thing? Are we about to start doing the same thing with athletes? Because for the most part, once they step out of the locker room and are not on the field of play, they've kind of been off limits and people sort of leave them alone. Is the media or the subversive element of the media, are we about to start tracking these guys down at concerts? Yeah. Because that's a game changer once that happens.
I think it's going to happen now. This opened up Pandora's box. You know, when we talked about Johnny Manziel earlier, I didn't talk about him getting thrown out of the Texas party.
Right.
Because you know what? College kids do that. They try to go to other parties. Sometimes you're going to have altercations because you got a bunch of stupid drunk kids around. The problem now is you've got cell phone cameras, you've got the picture phones, you've got everything that's going to be out there pretty much immediately, Instagram, Twitter, whatever the hell else.
Well, did you see what TMZ did to Lamar Odom the other day, the obviously former Laker guy? Weird video.
He's married to that Kardashian dude, right?
Yes. Weird video where they were just filming him, and he casually went over to the photographer's car, photog, I believe they call him in the business.
Yeah, in the business. Yeah.
Opened the back door and just started throwing the guy's stuff all over the street because he's so not used to being tracked down like that. But the TV movie stars in Los Angeles, they have that happen to them all the time. I'm wondering if that's about to start happening in sports.
I guess you just have to get used to it, fair or unfair. We were out there in LA for a junket when I was working at a certain radio station that will now go unnamed, and we were out there. TNT flew us out there, my wife and I. And my wife said, let's go, because we were staying at the Beverly Wilshire where they filmed Pretty Woman.
Sure.
Let's go to the Ivy and have lunch.
Of course.
Across the street, Gwen Stefani is walking with her kids. Hey, Gwen! Hey, Gwen, can we get a picture? Hey, turn them around. Let's see your kids. Where are you going? What are you buying? Where are you shopping? I mean,
That's
they're
a weird
chasing
thing.
her down the street as she has her children.
That's a weird thing to see, right?
Scary is what it is. But I guess you have to get used to it. Is it the price you have to pay for fame? I don't know. Not justifying it. I'm just saying it's going to happen more now.
Yeah, and it's going to start happening in the world of sports, apparently.
And it has already with Johnny Manziel. And Johnny Manziel, some of his malfeasance were posted on YouTube. You mentioned Lamar Odom. Everything you say, everything you do is going to be magnified.
Well, it's so easy to draw these sports guys off sides. I mean, you know, Gwen Stefani, somebody like that, is sort of stoic enough to kind of just sort of walk down the street and not give the money shot video. A lot of these sports guys aren't disciplined enough to do that. You say the wrong thing to them, you put the microphone a little too close to their nose, they're going to give you exactly what you want with just some, video you can post all over YouTube.
Speaking of money shots, how about Ray J calling out Kanye West, saying, you know what, I tapped that first. I was there first. Maybe you should watch the video a few more times. If you're Kanye, the tough guy that is Kanye, how do you react to that?
Well, I'm a little surprised that Ray J hasn't gotten a little more juice on the streets for being with her first. So I can sort of understand his frustration with this of, wait a second, how come I'm not more famous? I sort of get where he's coming from on that.
Let me just tell you this. After I had to watch some of that video because I'm a professional and I have to. You never know what you're going to have.
It was
to
show
talk
prep
about.
for you.
Exactly. I can kind of see where Kim Kardashian isn't worth the time. I don't think she's really a performer, B.A. I don't think she gives that extra mile.
I'm not saying I've seen it, but she does just sort of lay there.
Yeah. You need, sometimes, here's what I've learned over the years. Here's some advice for our younger podcast listeners. Sometimes the 5s, the 6s, the 7s, they work really, really hard. The 9s and the 10s, they don't much care. Because everybody's chasing them around.
That's quite the PSA from you. But am I right about this? Ray J's not.
The more you know.
Ray J's not famous at all, correct?
I don't believe so. I mean, he and Brandy, his sister, had that reality series. But aside from that and the video, I don't know what else he would be famous for.
I'm sure he probably thought that would work out a little better for him.
Well, that'll end the show and probably make a lot of you want to take a shower right now. But you know what? Sometimes offensive interference, that's the way it goes. B.A., thanks for joining me today.
It's been a lot of fun.
It's been fun, and you'll be back again, I hope, anyway.
I would love to.
After that last Ray J conversation. Again, she's a mannequin, and I don't want to get into it. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.